Hello everyone, and welcome back to Quickplay. On today's episode, we're going to be looking at Final Fantasy XIV's first DLC, Heavensward. The DLC was first released in 2015, while A Realm Reborn was released in 2013. This 2-year gap was used to add a lot of things to the game, the least of which was an overly long post-level 50 campaign. Since we'll be tackling the story first, let's back it up to the end of this post-level 50 story. With the defeat of a Dravanian horde attacking Ishgard, the Scions of the Seventh Dawn and the leaders of the 4 city-states of Eorzea, except Alamigo, gathered in the banquet hall of Ul'dah for a celebration. But Teleji Adeleji, a businessman on the Syndicate and an oligarch at the top of Ul'dah, was planning to murder the Sultana and frame the murder on you. The Sultana was actually planning to turn Ul'dah into a republic, but Adeleji caught wind of this and stopped her. Fortunately, Lord Lolorito, another member of the Syndicate and the richest man in Ul'dah, found out about the plan and switched the deathly wine for just a sleeping one. However, you still get framed for the quote-unquote murder, and Raban, the military leader of the city, killed Adeleji and lost an arm in the process. The Scions attempted to escape the city, but they were scattered across the world and even space. You, Alphanote, and Tataru escape north to your allies in Ishgard, who witnessed the framing and finally let you into their city. That's where the main story of the base game ended, and wow, this is a really amazing start. Anyway, after entering the city, you help out around the Western Highlands in the Sea of Clouds and get some teasers about the Archbishop and the Ascians, and build up some trust with the military leader Sir Amric, who you met later in the main story quest of the base game. The next thing that happens is a big story beat. Earlier in the main story of the base game, you met a character named Iceheart, or Ysael, I don't know how to say it, who could transform into a primal. Well, you didn't kill her, but you did defeat her primal state, and she ran off, and she's still been causing trouble, and now it's your job to find her and stop her. After you do, you get a vision from the ever-present plot-effective Echo, and it shows you about her past and the truth about the Dragonsong War. Oh yeah, that's been going on for about 1,000 years. It's a war between the Ishgardians and the Dravanians over the murder of one of their siblings by King Thoradin I. Once you found this out, you realize the lies of the Ishgardian Church, which that church is already very suspicious to begin with, but then you travel to Dravania to find your Scion mates and try to stop the war all at the same time. I think this is also around the time that the Seedseers and the Elementals of Redania pull Y'shtola out of the livestream, and the mystery of where Thancred, Lys, Papalymo, and Nymphilia are starts to get some teasers. So you get up to the Churning Mists and some epic battling happens. You kill Nidhogg, the main villain of the Dragonsong War, but only kind of. Now he's inside the body of the Azure Dragoon, and everything seems to be wrapping up until the Archbishop happens. The people realize the fraud that the Archbishop is and start looking for answers. In response, the Archbishop puts Sir Amric on trial, you break him out, but Harshfont dies in the process. This is the only death I cared about in the entire story, and it was really sad. Anyway, the Archbishop goes to Azizla, an Allagan fortress continent in the sky, but he took the only key to get past the force field. Now, we have to get there before he does. Whatever he's planning. Now we go to the Dravanian hinterlands, where Sharlayan is, and meet with Y'shtola's old mentor, Matoya, for guidance. They had to go to the center of the planet to find the energy source or something, and then they were able to bring the Enterprise Excelsior, really taking some Star Trek inspiration there, to Azizla with the help of Sid Garland, the other ever-present plot convenience piece. Through a very tedious romp through the floating continent, you find your way to the Aetherochemical Research Facility, where Archbishop Thoradin has gone inside. This is the last dungeon, and wow, it's pretty good. Once you get through the boss, that is a pair of Ascians, you think the day is saved. Suddenly, Thoradin busts through with the eyes of Nidhogg, previously defeated, and uses the power to turn into King Thoradin a primal. Through a very trippy battle, you defeat him, and the day is saved. For now. While Thornton is dead, the actual government of Ishgard is still in place. Sir Amaric is a temporary leader, but some zealous church officials try some crazy stuff. But first, it's time to try and end the Dragonsong War. Nidhogg isn't having any of that, though, and sabotages the first meeting between Ishgard and the Dravanians. This gets fixed very quickly because that church official I was talking about, he's now kidnapped quite a few people, including a child. When we make our way to the top of Ishgard, he pushes the kid off a ledge, but they were caught by Hraesvelgr, who helped us in the fight against Nidhogg. More and more people start to see through Thornton's lies, and the people support Amaric a lot more. Nidhogg is still very angry, but with the power of Hraesvelgr's eyes, you defeat Nidhogg, free Astidian, and bring peace to Ishgard. So now that we've covered the story, let's talk about the actual world, starting with Korthus. The Central Highlands was an area we talked about in episode 1, but in this DLC, the Western Highlands became accessible. This was teased back in the base game as a land past Snowcloak and the most uninhabitable part of the Highlands. They weren't wrong in saying that either. This area is littered with bones, ruins, and the remnants that Korthus used to be viable farmland. It just shows you how much damage the Calamity did to other areas of the world besides the main 3 we visited in the base game. Each DLC has 6 new areas to visit, and with Abalathea's Spine only having 2, this rounds out the total. This zone acts as a hub to almost every other new zone you've unlocked. It has access to 2 of the 3 Dravanian areas, the Sea of Clouds and Ishgard, which will get you to Azys Lla. From Heavensward onwards, the maps are much bigger, leading to some interesting terrain. The addition of flying in this DLC also adds to how dynamic the world can be. Korthus has some very high peaks to it, something that was expanded upon in the Sea of Clouds. Overall, the Korthus Western Highlands is a cool area, but a nightmare to traverse on foot. The rocky terrain may give you trouble at first, but once you unlock flying, getting across this area will be a cakewalk. Of this DLC is Dravania, the home of the dragons. Though, contrary to what you might think, the dragons only inhabit a little over 1.5 of the 3 zones in Dravania. First up is the Forelands. Up to this point in the game, we hadn't seen anything like this. The trees were 90% roots, there were ruined towers, and a volcanic-like mountain with a crystal floating above it that you could go inside, and a Borg-like beast tribe known as the Vath. The Vath are actually really interesting. They're like the Borg, except they're bugs, and the whole plot surrounds a group that got cut off from the collective known as the One Mind and has become known as the Non-Mind. The One Mind has a primal, Ravana, and this is the first primal unique to Final Fantasy XIV. Interesting. The Churning Mist is another area of Dravania, and this is where the dragons live, along with Dravanian Moogles. It's a floating landscape with lots of ruins and minor dragons you can fight. This land houses the domain of both Hraesvelgr and Nidhogg. Zenith is a crumbling altar and the resting place of Hraesvelgr. There's not much to see here. The Eyrie is Nidhogg's domain, and it's a dungeon. It's pretty cool, and the site of one of the more major battles towards the middle/end of the DLC. It's got a lot of crumbling ruins that might end up being part of the dungeon, whether blocking or helping you along your way to fight Nidhogg. The final zone of Dravania is the Hinterlands, and this is where Sharlayan is located. It's a pretty nice area, but it's split in 2 and has no Aetherites. It's connected by a semi-city, Idleshire, with both sides of the zone holding parts of Sharlayan. Some of the more interesting locations here are the Great Gooble Library, the Arboretum, and Stone Sea Sky. Matoya also lives here, and another trippy dungeon takes place in her cave. Overall, Dravania is really cool and has some awesome shots throughout the time you'll spend here in both the main story and beyond. The final area we haven't spoken about yet is Ablethea's Spine. It's a floating continent in the sky, being made up of a bunch of different pieces like the Sea of Clouds and Azys Lla. Let's take a look at the Sea of Clouds first. This is a huge area that isn't fully traversable on foot, and lots of it can only be accessible once you've unlocked flying. The Zundu live here, and Bismarck is the primal plaguing the land. He is slowly eating the continent, but you defeat him so it's okay. The land is pretty green, and its climate is supposedly really cold, but it doesn't seem like it. The verticality of this level makes it ultra dynamic and a joy to fly around. There are so many peaks and valleys and outlying islands to go and visit too. The people who live there are sometimes pirates, and just wow, the actual lore behind this whole area is just crazy. The other half of this floating land is Azys Lla, an unnatural mechanical floating continent made by the Allegan civilization. The whole place is really boring, but it had some real potential. Some of the Allegan creatures were so crazy and interesting, it's just a shame the whole place went to waste the way it did. Heavensward is such a great time to play. The story is engaging, the characters are good, and the world is very interesting and has a lot of depth. The extra content is also amazing. Overall, Heavensward is even better than the base game. I give Heavensward an 8 out of 10. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of Quickplay, and goodbye.